The house itself is absolutely inspired by the house I lived in college. And so when we lived there, some weird things happened. One of my roommates claimed that he saw an old man standing at the foot of his bed. There were a lot of kind of footsteps and things like that, which, this was a college house and people were coming and going all the time and we never locked the doors. So there were probably like material explanations for some of these things, but maybe not. I mean, I just remember at one point, yeah, I heard someone walking like in the kitchen and then we had like this side door and then they walked out the side door and down the steps to the basement or something like that. And when we went to go look, there was nobody there and it was very clear footsteps. And then the basement in that house, it was like this weird, like I don't know, very like dungeony, like small, creepy place, and it had like in the book, there's kind of like a crawl space in the basement, and it had that crawl space. It was directly inspired by that. So, yeah, this house I lived in, it was God, I 810 Wolf Street. That inspired 4596 James Circle. So this is a family who has just moved from Ohio to the town of Jackson Hill, which is absolutely a reference to things. Like there's so many different references in here, I can't remember them all myself actually at this point. Um, but James Circle is obviously a reference to Henry James. And the 4596, I think, had some meaning at some point, but God, if I can remember what it is. So readers, if you figure it out, let me know. I'll probably send you a special prize. But yeah, the family they're kind of billed as your average American family in certain ways. So mom, dad, two kids, except the family dynamics are anything but ordinary. In the early 2000s, I remember I was reading this coffee table book called Post Secret, where people would send in like their secrets, right? And the one that always stuck with me was one that just said, I love one of my children. And so that was a direct inspiration for the family dynamics, as well as just the way that kids are often portrayed in horror. Like there's the whole creepy kid thing, and then a lot of the time in horror fiction, especially when you have adult writers writing from a child's perspective, it sounds like an adult writing a child versus it doesn't actually sound like a child. Like I just read Josh Mallerman's Incidents Around the House. That actually does feel like it's from a child's perspective, which is a really neat trick that he pulls off. But so I think for Damien, I wanted to like as I was coming up with this character, I wanted to kind of make fun of and kind of subvert the tropes of the creepy kid, and also kind of shine a light on the way that kids are not written realistically in horror a lot of the time, or in fiction in general, essentially. And so Michaela is, for lack of a better word, kind of like the foil to Damien in a way. She's like a little bit of the straight man to his like kind of like if you think about like I don't know Chris Farley and David Spade, for example. Like she's his David Spade. She's the one who's kind of reining him in a little bit. Hal is kind of like an oblivious, semi-bland person. He's like the embodiment of the color beige. Like if beige came to life and had a couple kids. He likes sports ball. He likes dad jokes. He sort of likes his job. He loves his family. He's not a very complicated person, which you know all the other characters have a lot of complication, and so I thought it was with Hal, he just is he is what he is. He's kind of the counterpoint to all that. Sabrina is someone who has never really figured out what she wants in life, and so she just kind of like finds herself doing things just to do them. So she had a family because it seemed like an okay idea at the time, but she wasn't really super passionate about the idea of having a family. And so now she's kind of ended up in this situation where it's like over a decade later, she has two kids. One that's, she likes Michaela just fine, but Damien freaks her out. She thinks he's like this devil spawn, basically. And so she has a very fraught relationship with him, and she's kind of stuck in this situation that she absolutely, absolutely made for herself. I don't want to take away her agency, but she's just kind of drifted through life, and she's been a passive character in her own life for a lot of time. And definitely the most fun was just coming up with ways to subvert all the standard haunted house tropes. And without again into spoilers, there are definitely some very interesting ways I think, and people have told me that I was able to do that. But Yeah, that was absolutely the most fun when you're kind of like figuring out different scares and where they go in the story and stuff like that. Well, I think one of my favorite scares is when you think someone is somewhere and it turns out that they're not, right? And so, you hear like let's imagine you're at home and you hear music turn on upstairs, right? And then your partner walks out of the garage and it's like, well, how did that music just turn on upstairs? That's the kind of, that scare, anything rooted in sort of the mundane, but it's slightly off. Like, when you come up with, when you come face to face with some sort of like impossibility in your day to day, that scares me. Well, The Neighbor Zephyr was really fun to write. Absolutely. There's not like a huge cast in this book. It was originally a novella, and I was pretty limited with the amount of world building I could do, the amount of space I had. And it also, though, it's really just about the core family. There are other characters who kind of pop in and out, but it's really about Sabrina, Damien, and Damien, frankly.